that. Right, so thanks so much for joining us today for our SMA Patient Advisory Board. We are super, super excited. I know from my perspective, and I think from our perspective at Rare Diseases South Africa, SMA has been one of those very, very difficult conditions for us from an advocacy perspective. I know so many of you on a personal basis, and I've watched so many, of our SMA patient journeys, and it's absolutely devastating that we are still battling as much as we are to get access to treatments, despite our best efforts. And I think what's really so scary is the fact that there's, as is not the case with many of the other conditions, but that we've got there's options for SMA at the moment, and there's lots of options. Like, there's many options in the form of treatment, whereas in many other rare conditions, that's not the case. And you're limited to only one. And for us to still not have any confirmatory access available to us is actually just quite devastating. So the intention of today's meeting is really just to get a better understanding of the patient journey from your perspective, so that we can develop our advocacy plans, appropriately and make sure that we are always guided by the patient journey in terms of what it is that we want to focus on. And we do share the outcomes of this meeting with our pharma partners, specifically for them to be acutely aware as well of the things that they need to be focusing on from an industry point of view. I think very often there's a disconnect between the patient's perspective and industry's perspective on what the needs are. So they think we need fancy cooler boxes and stuff like that. And we're like, no, we actually need pills that are sized so that we can swallow them. Or, so very, very often there's a disconnect. Also, just to mention that this is completely it's an informal environment. It's just going to be a conversation. There is no right or wrong answers. Feel free to share as much detail as you want to. There's absolutely no right or wrong way to approach it. We will be trying to keep things, obviously, just from a time perspective, we will try to keep things in their specific slots. So we try kind of just focus on a different objective sort of every 10 to 15 minutes to try get through them. And I'll ask some questions and then we'll go around the table. If you have anything that you feel super urgent, you can always raise your hand and then we'll jump to you first. If there's anything that you're not comfortable answering or you don't want to share, you can just say not comfortable to answer that question. And that is completely, completely okay. So that's just a little bit about how today's going to go. So now I'm going to hand over. We'll start off. I'm just going to go as you guys are listed on my computer, with regards to you guys giving a short introduction of who you are. So, who you are, like if you had to sum it up into 5 sentences, I'm X, Y, and Z. This is how old I am. This is where I live, just so we can get an understanding of who's on the call today. So, Nicole, if we can start with you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nicole Padiachi. I'm 20 years old, and I'm a third-year law student at Varsity College, Durban North. So I live in Durban. And yeah, I was diagnosed at 2 years old on my 2nd birthday with SMA type 2. And yeah, I've never let my disability stop me from doing anything. So that's what I want to continue doing.
That's awesome. Thanks, Nicole. Tasneem?
Hi, everyone. My name is Tasneem. I'm a mom of a rare warrior, Iman Kasuji. She's now 13 years old. My age doesn't matter, so I'm not going to say that. Iman was diagnosed at the age of 9 months with SMA type 1 and given 3 months to live. And as I said, now she's 13. So yeah, wow. I'm also the founder of Cure SMA South Africa. Thanks to Kelly's encouragement, and we ended up winning the Red Support Group Awards, I think it was, in 2018. Yeah.
Good stuff. Okay, then we have Andrew.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Perfect.
Yep. Good. I'm Andrew Bullman. I have 2 children diagnosed with SMA. Type 2, I'll get to her. Type 2 stroke type 3, we're not quite sure. The diagnosis is varied. I asked Jess my oldest Jess, I asked her to join us. She is nearly 19 years old, and she is currently at University of Cape Town studying genetics. And my son is, how old is mine? 16?
turning 18.
17, sorry. My son Mark is 17. He also has SMA to a similar level as Jess, and he is in matric.
Okay.
Thank you.
Such a typical dad thing. How old is he now? I just had to laugh. I think it's happened to it seems to be a theme. Okay, Akushen, I know that you are there. Hi.
Hi guys, I'm Akashan. It's father of Arushi Nankishore, diagnosed with SMA type 1 at 6 months old. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And then last but not least, Kerry.
Hi, I'm Kerry. I have SMA type 2. I was given 5 years to live, and I'm 25 in October.
And yeah, and what just so encouraging, just actually seeing you guys just carry on is just amazing, honestly. All right, so thanks so much for those introductions. We also do have some participants on the call, so I can see that we do have some people from our team that have joined, just so that you guys know. We've got Sharon, who's our office manager. We've got Nomsa, who's, I'm sure all of you know Nomsa, our patient coordinator. We have Missy, who's our marketing and events person, who will be also doing the post-meeting follow-up reports, as well as Humela. So they are on the line as well. And then we are also going to be joined by Esnath and Polosho, who will be joining us from Roche. And they are there to just get a better understanding from an accessibility perspective and from an industry point of view. So, but they won't be speaking at all. The conversation's about you guys today. All right, so if we can start maybe on the first sort of topic, and that's very, very, the objective of this sort of section is to gather feedback on the disease knowledge and educational needs. So kind of things around how your symptoms started, what was the kind of first things that you noticed? I think if I can put into perspective why we asked this question, is that very often from a medical student's perspective, they learn that the symptoms of this condition are A, B, and C. When you actually speak to patients, how the disease manifests for them is very, very different to how it's put out in paper. So that's the one thing. The second sort of element is, what was your diagnosis what was your journey to getting a diagnosis? How long did it take? What tests were done, etc. So I'm going to start off with symptoms. And if you can maybe think back, and I know for many of you who were diagnosed as children or as really, really young children, you might not be able to remember your symptoms, but you would probably have heard your parents describe it to other people, or, you might have heard how they manifested. So kind of if we can say, what were the 3 most significant symptoms for you that led either you or your parents to believe, hold on, something's amiss? And I'm going to switch it around, so we'll go back to front this time. So we'll start with Kerry.
So for me, I have a twin sister, so a lot of our comparisons were quite direct and specific. So she doesn't have SMA and I do. So she was sitting and crawling on her own. So she was progressing and developing a lot more than I was. So initially that was sort of the first sign. When I was then sort of diagnosed with low muscle tone, so we did 6 months of muscle sort of regeneration and trying to work on the muscles and lots of physical activity and stuff like that, obviously with no results and nothing concrete came out of that. So then we did a neck biopsy where I was diagnosed with spinal muscular atrophy. For them, it was also in the beginning. They weren't quite sure if it was 1 or 2. They often say sort of on the cusp of both, because they're not really sure where I fit in between the 2 different levels.
Okay, thanks, Kerry. I'm trying to think, Nicole, maybe?
So I was the firstborn so I have a younger sister and she doesn't have SMA. But when I was born, my parents didn't know what to expect as their firstborn child. They had no experience before that to compare it to anyone else. And I was born premature, so I was very tiny as a child. But when I was in creche, the teacher there picked it up and they called my parents in, and they were like, okay, they put me on the far end of the room, and I've heard the story 100 times. And my dad and mom were on one side and I was on the other, and then they called me. And instead of like crawling or taking steps or anything, I dragged myself towards them. And the teacher was like, this isn't normal. Other kids are not crawling at this stage, and she's pulling herself towards you. So that kind of like sparked the whole query into what's going on with Nicole. Why is she not reaching the milestones that other kids were? And I actually just met one of my dad's old friends from back in the day who moved to London, and she was a physiotherapist, and she told me how when I was a baby, she saw me and she saw that I wasn't reaching the milestones that other kids were, and she pushed them to get me tested and see what was going on and what they could find out. And then that led to the whole diagnosis. But yeah, I think it was definitely just not reaching the proper milestones. And from a baby till now, I'm still very tiny compared to other people my age. So I think that was also another symptom.
Okay. Thanks very much. Thanks. Sure. Tasneem?
So Iman was about 7 or 8 months of age, and a family doctor, as a GP, noticed her head lagging and said there's something wrong with her. So that was the first actual sign that something was wrong. But in my husband's family, his brother's kids were all met their milestones very late. So we were just told, you know what, just give her time, she'll get to it. And Iman's the first child as well. She's my first. So I didn't realize that, you know, she was not meeting the milestones. She stopped, she couldn't roll, she couldn't lift herself up. She was very floppy. Then, I mean, we went to the pediatrician after, and he said she's very, very floppy. So that was another symptom. And then the other pediatric neurologist mentioned the fasciculations in the tongue. It was quite evident from the time of her diagnosis, yeah, just before that.
Okay, thank you. Andrew?
Right, it's similar patterns in the stories emerging here. So Jess, I think hit all her normal developmental milestones up till about a year old. And then she actually started walking, but kept falling over. And again, this was our first child, so we had no experience, and we just thought it was the process of learning to walk that you fall over. But she started falling more and more, and weirdly never put her arms out to stop herself, so it would go down head first, which is a lack of a reflex action. So she kept hitting her head on the ground and ended up with a big permanent bump on her head from this. So we by that point in time had our second child already, unknowingly. So we started at a normal pediatrician who struggled to diagnose, but he saw that she had a tremor in her hand. In fact, he used to take her to the shops, and the lady used to say, "Shame, she's cold," and her hand was shaking. And the pediatrician said the shaking of the hand is not normal. And he recommended that we see a specialist pediatrician who's from Tygerberg Hospital, who specialized in, what do you call it when you have a brain injury when you're born?
Neurology?
Something like, yeah. She didn't know, and she referred us to Red Cross Children's Hospital, to Professor Willemshurst. And we spent about 7 or 8 months attending her clinic once a month, the neuromuscular clinic. And weirdly enough, even with all the symptoms that seem so obvious now, which is the tongue, the shaking, and the not being able to walk properly, they also couldn't diagnose. And eventually we got our diagnosis at age 2 after Jess had a muscle biopsy on her leg. And the results of the muscle biopsy gave us our diagnosis. The private pediatrician, who was a specialist neurological pediatrician, she also gave us a misdiagnosis and told us that Jess wouldn't live more than 2 years. Well, she's 19 now, and here she is. And she also said that she'd only ever seen one SMA case in her life of 30 years, and that was at university. So I guess that is often the problem with diagnosis in the private sector.
Absolutely.
And then, and then just to finish that, Mark wasn't showing any symptoms at that point, being a year younger, but they sent us off to Groote for genetic testing. And then they came back with the news that Mark also had the same affliction. And then when he started walking, also the same thing, he was falling, and then we knew. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. Akashen?
So with us, it's also quite similar with Tasneem as well. She hasn't been meeting her movement milestones, and we've also well, as new parents, we didn't really know much about what to expect with regards to our child. So basically, we live in a big family. So like my granny, she's still around. So she's noticed that it's been like 6 months already, and the child's head is still very floppy. So she actually advised us to go to a doctor and go and check up what's happening, because it's not normal for that to be happening at that age. So we went to a normal pediatrician as well. They've had a look at her, and they've also noticed that she has a weak muscle tone, and her head is very floppy. And when they did the normal checkups and stuff, and they said they didn't want to give us any hope and tell us this is the situation, or even give us a diagnosis until it's properly diagnosed. So they referred us to a pediatric neurologist, and from there he actually, when he looked at her, did the same tests, but when he actually looked at her, he noticed that the flutter in the tongue, and that was one of the telltale signs for SMA. So he admitted her, put her in hospital, and did the normal blood tests and stuff like that. They tried to rule out as much as possible first before he confirms that this is the actual diagnosis. So they did the genetic testing as well and stuff like that for her. And about a month or so later, we got the results that she was SMA type 1. And that's when everything basically, we were given a life expectancy of 18 to 24 months, but Arushi turned 6 in July. So just living every day as strong as possible.
That's amazing. So I just want to clarify, I just want to confirm. So Jess, you had a muscle biopsy, and I think you were the only one. Nicole also had a muscle biopsy, and then the rest were all diagnosed by genetics.
I had a neck biopsy.
Neck. Oh, I can't actually even think about it. So I don't know if any of you are aware of this, and so listening to you guys talking about it now, I think it's just, I've kind of had a flashback of when my own child was a baby. They ruled out SMA in him. But when you guys were talking about the tongue vibrations now, I actually remembered how the one doctor made him cry so that he could watch the tongue. And now I understand what he was looking for. And he was like, I need to see his tongue. I need to see if it shakes. And I was like, what does that have to do with the price of eggs? That guy, didn't make any sense to me. But I now realize, so strange how you even learn. I mean, I've been doing this for 12 years and I still learn. So interesting. Okay, so it was interesting, the difference for me. It seems that years ago, like further back, the muscle biopsy was, obviously the biopsies were the way to go. Now they've changed to genetics, and it would be interesting to track if in the state sector in particular, where genotyping is not as readily available, if they're still using muscle biopsy as as a point of diagnosis. So Miss, if you're listening, just make a note there, please, on that, because that's something that I'd like to check up further. All right. Okay. So that's quite interesting. And for those who've now, so we've got pairs of siblings here. So obviously, Jess, with you guys, Andrew, what was it like when you got the second child diagnosed? I can only just imagine the blow of now realizing that it's not just one, but both.
Yeah, pretty devastating. because you're dealing with worst case scenario diagnosis from a medical practitioner who's not experienced with the condition. So yeah, I mean, I guess the parents in this group will understand, but to be told that both your children are not going to live longer than 2 years is a pretty devastating diagnosis that required, I guess, therapy for myself, my wife, and the grandparents to sort of come to terms with it.
Yeah. It's yeah, at least I can't even contemplate. I think also, you know, given the fact that he wasn't symptomatic at the time, it must have just really been a devastation, because it must have really sideswiped you. And I suppose
I mean, the odds of having 2 children in a row are quite extreme. I mean, even the genetic counselor who did the testing said that it's highly unlikely to occur before we got our results, but it did occur. So we often say it's like we won the lottery, but the wrong way around, because the odds of it happening are so extreme.
Yeah, and we know that this lottery is also financially devastating, as opposed to the other way around, where it's financially positive. This is the other way.
I'm sending them out to work to earn money to pay for themselves soon.
Good for you. That's a good approach. And Kerry, I think also, just, you know, from your perspective, I suppose having a direct sibling to be able to compare with was, in a way, a positive, in the sense that your parents had that comparison to be able to say, hold on a second, like, it's, you know, she's not meeting the same milestones. Whereas I suppose the risk was that she would have been diagnosed later.
So we were the babies, because my parents have I have 2 older siblings as well. So there was a lot to compare with. But my sister used to fall quite a lot as well. So she has like some of the gene, but not SMA, if that makes sense. So when they first told her, they said that she carries it, as in her and her husband could, if they both positive, would give it to their child. But the way they explained it to my parents was she has it, as in they just didn't word it properly when they told her. And I mean, it's like you said, it's one thing to get told you have one child, but to then be told that their twin has it the same, just because they misworded it, was devastating in its own right. My mom was, what are you talking about? And they're like, no, this is what we actually meant. So I mean, it's a bit of a hard situation. Like you said, the medical professionals don't always fully understand what they're saying, and it's difficult to put your full faith in then what they're sort of explaining to you.
How many of our families today actually went for genetic counseling? So just you, Tess, just you.
I think so.
And
the reason we went for genetic counseling is because we wanted to do the IVF with the prenatal genetic diagnosis to have more kids. So that's why we did that. Otherwise, we probably wouldn't have went for genetic counseling either.
Wow.
I don't know that it was an option available to us 20 years ago or 18 years ago, because I don't remember ever being offered the option. I only ever spoke to a professor at UCT who undertook the tests.
Yeah. So I think back then it probably was available, but even now, the referencing to genetic counseling, just, you know, the referral mechanisms just don't happen for whatever reason. And very, very sad, because I think a lot of the trauma that your families went through would have been alleviated had someone taken the time to explain things to them, you know, accurately and appropriately. I saw, Akushen, you put your hand up.
Yeah, we were actually with her neurologist. He's actually got them from the Muscular Dystrophy Foundation to come in and actually sit down and talk to us with regards to genetic counseling and stuff like that. And you know, basically getting us to both do the genetic tests, my wife and myself. So we both actually are carriers, and so that's how baby there was a stronger chance of her having SMA as well. So yeah, so we wouldn't have actually known if we never did the test as well.
Yeah.
So that also, in a way, it actually gets us the rest of the family. You know, they also got to understand that, you know what, when they do have children, there is a possibility if they don't do testing as well. So So if any of the family members has to have a child, they know that SMA is one of the things that they need to notify the gynecologists and stuff that should do the test. And then obviously they need to make a decision when it gets to that point.
Yeah, absolutely. And I had one more question with regards to all of you were given timeframes of not living past 2. I mean, do you ever want to go back? Do you go back? Because I do it. I send pictures when John's birthday comes around to his medical professionals. And I say, like, look, we've survived another year, just to remind them never to limit patients' lifespans based on experience, because I think it's just brutal. But I mean, do you guys ever have moments where you like, exactly like you did, Andrew, well, here she is 19 years later. Do you feel it's important that I want to say almost, because that's an invalidating comment to say, like, this is all you're capable of. You're only going to get 2 years and then it's done. I mean, is it an important factor for you that they know as treating clinicians to not do that to other patients? Nicole, your hand shot up there.
Yeah, so my story is a bit different because obviously it was such a long time ago. But when I got diagnosed, my parents were brought into the hospital and they were told that I won't live past 25. And that's still a lot later than most people were given. And I don't think there was a proper understanding between SMA and the whole diagnosis process. But I know that the nurse that was there that day went up to my dad and said, "Stop crying. You need to get over it now. It is what it is." And it was so blunt and like there was no emotion behind it. And she could have been having a bad day, but small things like that can trigger a long line of events that could have been way different if my dad didn't handle it the right way. So I think that there needs to be a better take to how the bedside manner. I think that needs to be something that should be addressed with all nurses or clinicians or whoever it is that's dealing with this. It's important that we have this like baseline of this is something hard to take in. It's not something that you're just going to understand in a click. But yeah, I think it's very different to most people's stories because I was diagnosed with type 2, but the way that I'm digressing doesn't seem like I have type 2. And I don't think that I have the right diagnoses.
Okay, interesting to note. Anyone else have any comments on this issue?
I remember the doctor told us that Iman has he didn't even say she won't make it past the age of 2. And she was 9 months at the time. He just said maybe she has a month or another month or another month. Those were his words. And take her home, love her. And then my husband asked him, should we give her vaccinations, to continue with that? It's like, don't waste your time. And I remember my mom's words. My mom passed away last year. And she mentioned that, does this doctor know whether he'll be around tomorrow? And it's such a case that we've met other doctors as well. One doctor in the family even mentioned to me that, I mentioned to him that there was a treatment at the time. There was a treatment available. So his words, well, this was about 8 years ago, before anything was FDA approved. He just mentioned to me that I don't think Iman will make it. The same doctor passed away with COVID last year. So time frame is not in their hands. Definitely not. Definitely
Absolutely.
not. So.
Andrew?
Look, I think when you first get a diagnosis, I think it's a natural reaction from parents to want to know the answer to this question, because research on the internet can be very hit and miss. I mean, clearly there's a lot more information about SMA available now than there was 20 years ago. There's been a couple of high-profile incidents that has raised the understanding. One of them is the nephew or niece of a very famous golfer in South America, that he did fundraising to raise money to pay for the Zolgensma treatment. So that was all over the press. And then I was actually interviewed on the radio here in Cape Town a number of years ago when that South African woman in the UK, I think she killed her 2 children. And there was a lot of interest in what this SMA actually was and what would drive a mother to do that. So anyway, I digress. But the important thing is, I think that's a natural question people would ask. And I would certainly ask that question immediately again. I think the problem is with the medical practitioners in private practice, especially the GPs, they just maybe don't have the knowledge to give an answer, and maybe they shouldn't until they know what the answer is. Because we have a friend who had a type 1 child that didn't make it much past 3 years, and I think I'd want to know, because there's a massive range we're talking about here. There are type 1s that don't make it past 12 to 24 months, and there are type 2s and 3s that are living in their 50s and 60s and older and keep going. So there just doesn't seem to be a box that everyone fits in. So I think that the doctors should maybe be educated a little bit to give the correct information. Because if they're not going to give the information to the patient's going to go looking for it somewhere. There's no doubt.
Agreed. And Christian, I'll come to you now. And I also do think that the interventions in the as interventions improve, even outside of therapy, that also changes the outcomes quite a bit. So if you take a patient who's born into a rural setting that doesn't have access to running water, electricity, etc., those patients might be more prone to getting pneumonia and not being able to, have the necessary resources and diaphragmatic response to address that. Whereas someone from a wealthy, affluent home would have all the available things required to be able to treat that. And I think so. It's a very, very variable space. And I also think that they often fail to take the human spirit into account as well when making those assertions. Akashin?
Yeah, sorry about that. So basically, I think like most of the life expectancies that they've given us is based on statistics. And, it's very hard for them to actually say, you can, but obviously they're going to say, based on statistics, a child with SMA type 1 generally lives 18 to 24 months, or a type 2 would live for a certain amount of age. But obviously, as you said, it's obviously motivation, and it's your self-motivation as well. If you're going to fight everything and, treat everything symptomatically, and you're going to obviously live a longer time. And obviously, you're going to reach, you're going to defy those odds that they're giving you and putting against you. Obviously, you got to also go and look at additional things that you can do as well on your own in terms of preventing muscle wastage by atrophying by doing, and obviously trying to do a little bit more extra exercise and things like that. But again, it's not accessible to everybody, and not everyone can go and do it. It's not. You also do have time restrictions, and obviously there's a lot of factors that comes in every day, and you won't be able to do it all the time. But if we can make the time on our own, just to obviously try and do those things, that prevents a lot of complications that's coming up.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, so I think if we can move on to, because we're touching on it a little bit now, I think, in terms of gathering insights between patients and healthcare professionals, did you find that you guys have been participatory in the conversations, or do you find that your clinicians have enough information available on hand to be able to answer the questions that you often have? Do they give you access to the appropriate resources? Do you feel that those lines of communication are open? And the understanding here from our side, what we try understand in asking you this question is, when we are engaging with clinicians, like, what do we need them to realize the patients actually need out of these engagements, more so than what they think they need to give us? So if you guys could touch on, like, what are the bads and the goods? Because some clinicians do things really, really well, and it's important for us to share those stories too. So Nicole, I saw you shaking your head immediately and you were like, no. So I don't know if you maybe want to start.
So for me, I've never been on medical aid, and I've been a state patient since birth. We obviously can't afford medical aid, and I live in a single family household, and my dad looks after my sister and I. So it's not feasible for us to have medical aid for all of us, or even just for me. Like, it just doesn't work. So as a state patient, doctors is in Durban, and I go to King George Hospital, and I've only been going there because I had to get the titanium rods implanted in my spine, and that's the only reason that I've been going there. I don't have a neurologist. I don't have any other doctors other than those doctors that I just go for checkups with. So when I told them that like I have SMA, I have these types of pains and this and that, they don't understand anything behind what's going on. And like just recently, I've been having a lot more pains in my hips and lower back and stuff. So I went for an MRI, but it was very, I don't know how to put this in words, but there wasn't a strong basis behind it. It was just, okay, this is what we think could happen. This is what we think might be able to give us an answer. So let's just send you there. Like, I think it's difficult to put into words what's going on in my head, but yeah, I don't think there's enough information in our governmental sector of doctors to help us properly treat people with SMA.
Okay, thank you. Andrew?
Yeah, I find the general knowledge of SMA and the day-to-day challenges we face is very poorly understood in the medical profession. Not just government, Nicole, private is just as bad. We don't really go to any professionals on a regular basis because there's no need to. We as parents know more about the condition and what is needed to deal with it than the medical professionals do. So if we need a particular type of medical professional, like a pulmonologist, we'll go look for one and tell them what needs to be done. Even at the top of the pinnacle of the understanding, which is Professor Willemshurst at Red Cross, who deals with SMA patients around the country all the time, I find we've stopped going because I found it was not beneficial to us anymore. They were not telling us anything we didn't know already. My only question right now is, how the hell can we get hold of a drug that has been developed overseas, which is effectively a treatment or a cure? And nobody can answer that question. So if drug companies are listening, you know, obviously everybody in this room is going to be dying to ask that question, because even earlier we spoke about life expectancy. It's a moot point now. If you live in the US or Canada or Australia or the UK, and you are born with type 1 SMA and you get the right treatment at the right time, life expectancy is not an issue anymore.
Yeah.
You know, so I think this is becoming our biggest fight, is access to the treatment, to like Spinraza or Zolgensma. Other than that, everything else I find every professional to be fairly uninformed.
Do you feel that because of the access challenges that medical professionals are almost don't want to recommend the treatment or engage on the treatment because it's like it's too it's like we're never going to get it, so there's no point even discussing it? Do you find that they're quite dismissive of the issue?
Which treatment are you referring to?
Any treatment, like not product specific, but more just the idea of having to fight so hard to get this treatment that they kind of not willing to, you know, put the effort in to advocating for these patients to get the treatment.
The only person I've been in communication on this is Professor Willemshurst, and other than a trial that may or may not be happening, yes, it doesn't look like anybody's that interested in trying, simply because it just seems like an impossible task. I mean, these drugs cost tens of millions of rand. So although I read all the WhatsApp groups, there doesn't seem to be any progress. And I think most people just find it too overwhelming to even fight for, because it just seems so impossible. Our focus is on day-to-day care. Like the most important person in our life right now is the wheelchair seating specialist, who makes sure that the right cushions and the seats are set up correctly. So that's the most important thing in our life right now. A cough assist machine. So that's the reality.
Yeah. Okay. Tazzy?
So with, you know, how we said earlier, the devastation of getting the diagnosis, I think it's even worse now. When we mentioned this before, to have treatment available and we can't access it. As a parent, it is frustrating to watch your child just deteriorate without being able to do anything. And when you know you can do something, there are clinical trials. They're happening all over the world. They're happening in different countries. Why South Africa has all those same pharmaceutical companies here. Why can't we have those clinical trials here? Why not? We tried for Iman with Roche, with risdiplam, and they changed the diagnosis to a different type. She was always diagnosed as a type 1. Suddenly we apply for the trials and they say, no, Iman is a type 2. Where do they come out with this? Why say that you're going to do trials in a country when you're not really prepared to do it? Don't give these false promises that, oh, we are pharmaceutical companies, we are on your side, we want to help you, we want to give you access to treatment. It's all a lie. It's basically about making money off the patients. That's what the bottom line is. And Africa is considered low. South Africa itself, we can't afford it. So why bother looking at this continent?
Yeah, I hear you. Akashen?
We've had a few different experiences, but what we're actually grateful for is obviously, like, Arsh's neurologist is quite invested in her, and he tries his best. So every year, the Section 21 for treatment, to bring a treatment into the country, he does the application with the Medical Control Council every single year, even though we don't have the treatment accessible to us. He still applies for it. He still gets it approved and make sure that we have it on hand. Should the possibility of treatment come into the country, we have the Section 21, we're able to get it same time. Or obviously, firstly is the cost of the treatment. We have to try on our own to obviously try and raise the funds. If we can't do it, it is, we can't get our child treated, but he still diligently does the Section 21. But even though he's trying on he's trying his best, the moment he gets a Section 21, he does a PMB application to medical aid as well. And, for them to obviously approve funding for treatment. And then, even though he doesn't get all of that, he does the motivations, he does everything. Even though you get a reply from them saying, they're not going to, they're declining, the treatment, and then there's no approval for it. We obviously need to look at in terms of trying to get it listed as a PMB condition, firstly, in order for the medical aids to actually look into it and actually try and help us and get our children treated at least. And obviously not only in the private sector, but obviously we need to look at doing something in the public sector as well, because there are a lot of patients who's not on medical aid as well. So, that's where the pharmaceutical companies need to step in as well and maybe assist in terms of maybe fighting with the medical aids and in a way promoting their product. But you're not worrying about your product, you're worrying about the people that you're trying to help. You created the treatment for patients with SMA, but what good does it do if the patients can't get access to it?
Yeah, agreed. Sure. Kerry, I'm not sure if you have anything to add.
In the beginning, my understanding was that I was too old for a lot of the treatments. Obviously, it's information I received from the medical professionals that we'd spoken to, and we've all established that that's not always the most reliable knowledge, but that's what I've understood. So personally, putting myself through this false hope activity every time there's a new drug is a lot more draining than just sort of removing myself from the situation. So as a family, we've made the decision to just step away from the drugs and looking at all this treatment stuff. And we're just going to go with living as long and as best as we can. It's too emotionally draining. And for us, I mean, we can't afford it anyway, so it wasn't worth this constant looking and researching and all that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's probably, I think that hearing how your doctor fills out the Section 21 form has probably, as a patient advocate, I think it's probably one of the saddest things I've heard is just that, and like I'm getting emotional because it's just that absolute desperation and willingness to put your heart on the line all the time to make sure that we've got our ducks in a row, so that in the event that someone throws us the bone, that we're ready, right? I think, just extremely sad, really. I think if we're comfortable, maybe we can, now it's a good opportunity now that I'm all tearful, to just maybe take a 3-minute comfort break. Go to the bathroom or make yourself a cup of coffee, if you will, and we can come back in 5 minutes. Is everyone comfortable with that? Good stuff. We'll see you now. Thanks. So I just wanted to find out, while we're discussing this issue around treatments, and I know it's a very, very tough question when you're not getting it, but what is successful treatment? I think that there's, I'm trying to rephrase how, if you could in sort of one sentence explain to your clinician what being successfully treated would feel like to you, and that it's not necessarily about the medication, just holistically what successful treatments would look and feel like to you. Anyone want to try put it into sort of a sentence as to what that would look and feel like? Ekashena, yeah, you can go.
To us, obviously having a baby successfully treated, obviously would mean that we're giving her a fighting chance in life as well. Knowing that there's so much of things that's against her, at least if there's a treatment available and if we can give her something, knowing that there's some medical intervention that's there, obviously to help her along, we're giving her a fighting chance in life. The best that we can do as parents. At least if we don't do anything and if something does happen to our child, what do we do then? Knowing that we haven't tried our best and we haven't given her a fighting chance, it's pointless then.
Yeah, I just want to say, you guys are definitely trying your best. There's no doubt about that. The system sometimes just doesn't work in our favor. Nicole?
I think one sentence is a bit of a restriction, but I think personally for me, it sounds dark, but I've never feared death. But having access to treatment would make me just feel so much more safe in my own body, that I don't have to fear that tomorrow I might not wake up because my lungs gave up on me or my heart gave up on me or something that most other people don't even think about. It's something that I constantly have this thought where tomorrow I could go tomorrow and it could be something as silly as, well, not silly, but something as small as choking on my own spit in the middle of the night, something like that, where most people can just cough it out. The thought of having treatment eliminates that completely. But yeah.
Oh. Jace? Sorry. It's okay. Don't worry about it.
She's got a pretzel in her mouth.
It's okay. It's fine.
Hopefully she's not going to choke on it. You know what? It's a difficult question to answer, but everything we're doing now is treating symptoms. The only treatment that would make sense to me is access to one of these new drugs that actually makes a proven difference. Up till now, there has been nothing and there is nothing available to us, and we are just managing or treating symptoms.
Yeah, but they want to know what it's going to fix.
What do you mean?
Like, I think if we could if we could like stop the muscle degradation, because that goes on your whole life. So you start with your muscles, and then as time goes on, they get smaller and then shrivel up and die, whatever. But if you could just maintain the muscles you have so that you can build them up and not lose them, I think that would be good, because then stronger muscles and you can do more.
No, that's a very good point. I mean, it's this happens with us with both our kids, is that you you reach a happy place where everything is, you know, under control, and the kids are going to school, university, and we're able to do this, that, and the other. And then out of the blue, something happens and an ability is lost. Like an ability to hold his ability to hold his head up on his own, or to swallow properly, or something. And it's just devastating to know that you can't maintain it. And that's why the drugs are such an issue, is that even just to be able to maintain what we have. So that's quite devastating when to deal with these changes that occur. Thanks, Bess.
I think if you guys are following, obviously, all the stuff that we're currently working on in the media and stuff around the access that we're currently fighting for, and I think I can't stress that enough to people who listen, because they're like, oh, but these drugs aren't curative, so like, what's the big deal? And I'm like, guys, in our world, cures are so far-fetched. We just want to like keep the abilities that we have and not get worse. We're not asking even to get better. That's how selfless this community is. We're not asking for cures. We're not asking to snap our fingers and be better. We're just asking to stay where we are today and not go forward. And I think you've just summed it up so well. It's just about, you know, just maintaining. And funders just don't seem to get the desperation behind the requests in that regard. You know, it doesn't seem profitable enough to just be maintained.
I mean, Kerry made an earlier statement that is exactly our philosophy as well, is that you said, oh, you're following this or that, but no, we're not really following what's going on in the world regarding the drugs. I'm aware of it. Once a year, I might email Professor Willemshurst and say, hey, what's the latest? But the reality is it's too emotional. It's a rabbit hole that takes up too much emotion to go down, to try and pin hopes on something. So we ignore it. We completely don't even think about it, discuss it, ignore it. We get on with trying to lead normal lives and doing things that normal people do. So that's probably why you don't see people here fighting for it, because it's too heartbreaking to be given something and then being told, you know, it's like you're in the desert and there's a glass of water right in front of you, but you can't drink it. You know, it's too much. So we ignore it.
Yeah, I can totally relate. I think, yeah, I get it. Nicole, I see your hand went back up, and then I'm going to come through to Kerry.
Yeah, so just like touching on what Andrew said, I think in this past weekend on Saturday, someone put on the group that there's trials for SMA type 2 older than 2 years old in Cape Town. And when I tell you, actual tears welled in my eyes, just having the thought of treatment in our access, and then being told you have to be in Cape Town, you have to have this list of requirements, you have to have all of these things. It's like everything just came crashing down again. And I try not to be emotional about it, and I try to put on a brave face about it, but it's the reality is we can't not get involved in this, because it's our lives on the line. So yeah, just that.
Yeah. I know. I think for anyone who's listening. Yeah.
Nicole, I don't know if it helps, but we're in Cape Town and we tried desperately to get on the same trial. And the fact that you're not in Cape Town is there is always something that is thrown in your way. Mark is under 18. They said, no, you cannot be on the trial because you've got rods in your spine, or you've got a spinal fusion. We can't do it if you've got a spinal fusion. Then they test you and say, if you've ever had this type of flu in your life and you've got immunity to this virus, you cannot be on the trial. So therefore you're out. Jessica, you're 18 and a half. Sorry, the trial is only if you're under 18. So even though you miss it by 6 months, you cannot be on the trial. And then somebody told us once, says, you know, I mean, we have British passports. My parents came from England. And people say, well, why do you not go to England and there you can get the treatment? And I said, well, you know what? Somebody told me that even in places like the US and Canada and the UK, just because you got SMA doesn't necessarily mean they'll give you the treatment either. It's so expensive. You've got to meet so many preconditions and jump through so many hoops, even in the UK, that there was a big splash less than 12 months ago when the first baby got the Zolgensma treatment. You know, so don't bother. Don't uproot your life and go somewhere and change your entire life, because everywhere in the world it is so expensive that there will be something that trips you up. You know, the medication is delivered by a virus. What are the chances when you are 20 years old that you've not encountered that virus in your life and you have immunity to it? And this is it. So Nicole, don't for one moment think because you're not in Cape Town, you're not getting it. There's always something, you know, and that's why we choose. I'm not getting emotional because many years ago I shut off this idea long ago and focused our attention on traveling and whatever, university and getting a job to earn money to support your parents.
Kerry?
Andrew sounds just like my dad. I think we're in exactly the same boat. He's like, time to get a job, pay your bills, let's go. Job. I'm fully on the same page. I think it's at that point where, for one, each SMA person is very much their own story and their own life. I don't think any of us have lived exactly the same situation, but I still think we can all understand where everyone is coming from. We've all had very similar experiences, but I'm sticking to making the most of the small opportunities that we have. And if it involves going to the physio once a month just so that my hips don't hurt, then that's what I'm going to do. And we go once a month because we can't afford more than that. So you got to pick what fits into your financial capacity. You got to pick what fits into, I still want a normal life. So I'm not going to spend every day at a doctor. It's not going to happen. I have things to do. I have plans with my life. I now have a full-time job. It's not going to happen. So I think you got to focus on the bits that work best for you, and you got to focus on the bits that keep you going and keep you positive and wanting to keep trying. And it's still going to be emotional. It's still going to drain a lot of people. And I think it just takes time, and it takes to the point where at 24, I'm like, I'm done arguing with medical people. I can't do it. I'll say my piece. I will do what I have to do. I will explain until I'm blue in the face because you don't have a choice. But you also know, I know my GP knows what's going on, and I will stick with that GP and go when I have to. But I'm not going to go see a neurologist and this, that, and the next thing, because I just find it very unnecessary at this point.
All very, very fair statements. Tazzy, I don't know if you have anything to add.
Just access, getting that access. It's always been like you going into this brick wall and you're lifting yourself up. And again, you're hitting that brick wall. We've even considered moving to Turkey. Andrew was talking about uprooting yourselves. The Turkish government was covering Spinraza for a certain amount of patients. Iman obviously met that criteria. But when we found out further, because the existing condition of SMA occurred, again, nothing. But getting a passport in Turkey is, and you're getting an investment, is cheaper than actually buying Spinraza. So you can get a passport for that price, and it'll be much less, and you're getting money back from it. So yeah, we've looked at options. I mean, we've been to America for a few of the SMA conferences, tried to get into clinical trials there. We've been to London, to great Ormond Street Hospital. So no, Nicole, it's not about being in Cape Town. It's about the pharmaceutical companies. If they want to give you the drug, if they want to make it accessible, if they want people to have the treatment, they will do it. It's not about how they advertise, where they use the marketing to say, yes, we are for the people. We're going to give you the treatment. We want to make lives better. It's got nothing to do with that. End of the day, it's a business transaction. That's what it is. The more profit they make, the more money they make. That's how they base it. They can give us access to those trials as well. They can. It's not impossible. They are here. They on South African soil. They are set up. They have the facilities. But it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen in a very long time.
I think we also need to take into consider, I think that there's a couple of cogs in the wheel, and I think everybody needs to take responsibility for their part to play. And I think, government from their perspective as well, in terms of acknowledging that they also have an obligation to us as citizens. I think our medical aides have a responsibility to their members. I think our provincial hospitals have a responsibility to the patients that they service. And it's all around, you know, what we can collectively do. None of us win. We all give. And everybody loses to some extent. But I think that the harshness of this situation, where there are drugs and there's zero access, is that the patients are the collateral damage at the moment. And we're the only ones in the fight. Nobody else is there. And we pay with our lives, you know. Yeah, really, I'm hoping that we can. I don't want to give anybody false hope, because I know that that's exhausting, but I'm hoping that we can try find mechanisms to try unlock, and that these conversations will drive people to try harder and think differently in terms of how we can get things done in this country for us. You know, we can't solve the whole world's problems, but if we can start with our own, that would be a great start. In closing, really, I just wanted to find out, you know, what support as a community do you guys feel that you need more of? Obviously, the access issue is the biggest issue at the moment. But outside of that, do you feel that there's still is there a need for better educational resources? Is there a need for better advocacy in terms of workplacing? You know, looking at both Kerry, obviously knowing Kerry works now, Nicole's going to be working soon. Jess, you're going to be obviously looking, judging by your dad, I don't know, you might be waitressing already. But you know, is that a place, what are the immediate community needs that are not being met that we can possibly try find solutions for?
If I can go, I would say education is important. I know when Iman was diagnosed, there was nothing here in South Africa, for example, and you know, we had to bring in information like just basics, cough-assist, BiPAP. Our doctors need to know that there are options. Don't tell your patient, take your child home, love them, and watch them die. There are things you can do to prevent or to help them to improve their quality of life. So cough assist is definitely, you know, it's my mission as well. I'm trying my best to try and raise enough funds to make sure that everyone in our SMA group has that. I mean, we have to take matters into our own hands. Pharmaceuticals not going to help. Medical aids are not going to cover PMB listing, all those problems. And education is important. I know Iman was sick now in June, and we had the cough assist device, and the nurses were so fascinated with how it worked. And they were saying that it could help so many other different conditions as well. So making sure there's a cough assist in each hospital, so we know if any of our kids go, they have access to it. They have access to it. It helps. It's not, I mean, it's not the cure for SMA, but getting those airways clear is our primary goal right now, to make sure those airways are clear at all time. Yeah, basically educating doctors, educating physiotherapists about the condition. They shouldn't base it on the textbooks or a few cases that they've seen over the years, and that's it. Because of obviously what we said earlier, it's not a one fit all type of disease. So I would say definitely educating our medical professionals is primary importance right now.
Okay. Anybody else? Andrew?
So I think there are people in this panel that are at different stages. And as I said, for us, we are way past the stage of SMA information or anything like that. The most important things in our life are actually the general challenges that people with disabilities face. The access to high quality advanced electric wheelchairs. You know, both my children are lucky enough to have German-made Otto Bach wheelchairs that raise up and tilt and do everything, which gives them a lot of independence. But out of the blue, Otto Bach withdraws from the country, and you cannot get them, and you cannot get the spares. And these machines cost, you know, anywhere from 100 to 200,000 rand each. So just access to equipment and companies that maintain them and service them. Being able to go somewhere and climb up a curb because the stupid government hasn't put a dropped curb. Little things, you know, just the work. I guess I'm interested to know what kind of job you have, Kerry, but what I think has actually advantaged all of us is COVID. COVID has pushed the world into a much more acceptable space of having meetings like we are having now, and being able to work from home behind a computer, which didn't even exist readily 3 or 4 years ago. So that's actually opened up a lot of opportunity. Stupid things like in 2019, we took the kids to London, and we want to go to New York next year. But our biggest challenge is them transporting the wheelchair on the plane, because the stupid airlines won't let our kids sit on their wheelchairs in the airplane. So we're so petrified that the airline company is going to drop the wheelchair off the side of the airplane and break it, or it doesn't appear at the other end. So those are just silly examples of things we face every day. But yeah, I guess in our stage of life, the general challenges that all people with disabilities face in terms of education, getting jobs. I mean, I could talk to you for hours about things, and I'm sure everybody else here could, but Jess applied to 2 universities last year, Stellenbosch and UCT, and their reaction to having her there was so polar opposite that you cannot believe it. The experience we had with Stellenbosch was so bad, I nearly went to the press, because they effectively sent us a letter saying that she was not welcome because of her disability. Whereas UCT were the complete polar opposite and welcomed her with open arms and provide free carers and assistance with a special unit and everything. And all it, so anyway, I'm not going to drag this thing on, but in a nutshell, that's it. It's the day-to-day challenges of young adult life with a disability that is most important to us.
Yeah, I can believe it. Nicole?
Yeah, I think just touching on what Andrew said is I know that, so we have a lot of people with SMA now who are now adults, and they've obviously grown up in a different time era than we have. But teenagers and young adults with SMA we're in a situation where the world is progressing, but they're not progressing with us and with our disability in mind. Like simple things like going out to a club or something. Sometimes we want to go out to a club and they're not wheelchair accessible. So it's things like going out and just having fun, like a normal teenager in university would want to do. We can't do simple things like that. Traveling. I went to Neisner in August last year, and we did like a little SMA awareness thing there. But on our way back, I have a pretty basic model of a wheelchair. It's got some amendments that my dad made just so I'm more comfortable. But it's the normal one that can fold when you take the batteries out. It fits under the cargo hold like a manual wheelchair would. And thank God I sat on the side that was with the cargo hold. And my dad put me in my wheelchair and folded up the wheelchair, put it down so they could put it in the cargo hold. And I looked out the window and they had my wheelchair on the little conveyor belt with the batteries in again. And it was sideways, it wasn't straight. So it got hooked on the conveyor belt and it was almost about to fall. And these people didn't know what to do with it. My dad ran out the airplane, jumped down there and was like, listen, stop the conveyor belt. You're going to break my child's wheelchair. You're not going to fix it when it's broken. That's her legs. So simple things like just training on electric wheelchairs that need to go in airplanes. It's not a big train smash. We did it for you, but for your own convenience, now you're making it a bigger problem. It's things like getting to work now. In Dublin, there's no wheelchair accessible public transport that can take us. We have, I think we have Pro Mobility or something to that effect. And it's 3,000 a week if I need to go anywhere. So it's not feasible. Things like that where it should be feasible. In America and stuff, they have Uber, which is wheelchair accessible. We don't have any access to that. It's the minor things that people don't think about is things that we need to make more aware about in South Africa.
Yeah. I saw Kerry did make a comment saying that we are needing awareness campaigns with better participation. I'm definitely seeing that we can certainly write a letter to the airline industry in terms of acknowledging these sorts of things. I think that that's a starting point, right? That would be a great win.
Definitely.
If we weren't losing wheelchairs and having them fling off conveyor belts. And I think that statement that your dad made, Nicole, like that's my child's legs, like is like a really pertinent point. I don't think that they see it like that.
It's also a small thing. So sorry to cut in again, but this is my body. when you're out in public and someone leans on you, you don't go out and lean on someone else while they're standing. You shouldn't be putting your legs on my wheelchair or putting your arms on my wheelchair or just hanging around because, you know, it's convenient for you. It's common courtesy is you don't put your legs up on someone else while they're sitting, so don't put your legs up on me. Things like that is where it seems like common knowledge, but it's not. And common sense is not common to everyone.
Yeah. Missy, if you're listening, I'm sure you are. I think that this is some great content for a social media campaign. You know, the extension of ourselves here. Akashen, anything from your side? I know you are a much younger cohort and might see it very, very differently from a support perspective.
Well, you know, it's I think everything boils down to education, and you know, it's a matter of us educating the rest of the world. You know, COVID came in and it did some wonders for us because in a way, you know, it kind of taught people how to be a bit more hygienic and, you know, take a bit more personal care, and also just basically wearing a mask. You know, it's preventing you from spreading any more viruses. For our kids and for all of us that has SMA, it basically means, you know, if you don't cover your mouth and you sneeze or you cough onto the child, that tiny droplet in the air could land the child into a hospital and, you know, put them on life support, or it could be the end of the child. You know, it's the simple things. And, you know, COVID actually came and educated a lot of people around personal hygiene and taking care of others. So that's the thing. We need to run basically maybe like an educational campaign for everyone to know, you know, there's, you know, COVID might have come and gone. It's still around, but, you know, there's a lot of the restrictions have been lifted and, you know, people are not wearing masks. But for us and for our kids, it's a normal day-to-day life. And, you know, we still got to take that precaution because the slightest of infections or the slightest illness can put the child in hospital. And, you know, it's every experience in hospital is a dangerous experience, and you don't know what could happen. So, you know, it's just a matter of educating everybody yet again, and being, you know, courtesy towards others as well. And, you know, it means that, you know, we need to get people out there to actually understand what's really going on in other people's lives. And,
absolutely. I think you're right. COVID has definitely brought about a much bigger consideration factor and an acknowledgement and understanding of what people sometimes go through. Kerry, I'm not sure if you have anything to add. Okay, so I think, wow, that's the end of the formalized agenda. I'm going to go around quickly for everyone to give their closing comments, but this has been really, really insightful. And I think even just a reminder to us that sometimes it's really, really basic interventions that we should be focusing on. And, you know, it doesn't always have to be complicated and grand. Andrew, I saw that you unmuted there for a sec.
Sorry, maybe I'll add it to my closing comments. When we were at an early stage in our journey, when our kids were aged 3 or 4 years old, we went to Durban and met with Lisa Bradshaw. I don't know if you know the name. I haven't been in contact with her for many, many years, but it was very inspiring meeting her because of the way she's tackled it, in the fact that she drove her own car. She had her child, had been married, had a child. She owned her own business, and she traveled around. And, you know, just the experience of meeting somebody who walked the journey before us in an extremely positive and a successful manner was one of the most helpful moments in our lives.
Well, I'm going to pose that back to you, because I think that that's one of the key critical things that all of you can do, is provide that encouragement to the greater community. You guys have obviously all taken it, you know, on the chin, so to speak, and you've gone on to really build a positive outlook, I mean, despite the circumstances. And I think that those stories need to be told, because you might be the Lisa Bradshaw to someone else.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, obviously, I mean, as I said, we've not been too involved in all these things. We're a little bit like ostriches.
We're coming for you, Andrew.
But I think we've achieved quite a lot. Luckily, I think we've been fortunate enough to have the means to do things that maybe not everybody has. But I'll give you an example. Jessica drives herself to university 20 kilometers away every day on her own. 25. She's also smarter than her dad, as you can see. And she drives on her own in a car that's specially adapted for her, that was imported from the UK. So just to see that level of independence, which even to me as a father was unheard of 2 or 3 years ago. So yeah, it's amazing what can be done in this modern world.
Good for you. Good for you, Jace. Tess?
As much as you say we don't have hope, we do have hope. We still have hope. There's always that small little light at the end of the tunnel that we can see. So even when we say we don't want, we don't expect to have it, because we've just been disappointed over and over again. But we do have hope. We have hope, and we have faith as well that, that there will be a way forward. And if not for our kids, then for the future generations, we hope that we can change. That's the main word, change.
Perfect. Thank you. Akashen?
Well, in a way, I see, kids, or, obviously from my daughter, living with a condition, a life-threatening condition. But, they don't let the condition get the better of them. It's they're so resilient, and, they she's an inspiration to all of us in our household. Basically, shows us, what doesn't mean you've got a condition that you can't do certain things. She applies herself to such a way that, we would never have thought of doing it in that sense. But, they're a lot more, it's just motivating at the end of the day. It's basically gives us a lot of hope as well, knowing that she's determined and she's a fighter. She wants to be here. So we got to do our best to keep them here as well, and give them the means to do what is necessary, and try our best, and obviously give them a chance in life as well. Right?
Yeah, good stuff. Thanks, Kerry.
Sorry,
no, carry on.
Yeah, I was actually, when you look at other countries and the way that, when there's a household where there's a person with a disability and things like that, we need to actually get our government to come on board with regards to that, and at least assist the families with certain things, like obviously making your household a bit more conducive for the person with the disability. And a simple thing like showering or having a bath, for example, we take it for granted. We can walk into the shower and have a bath, but our kids, they can't do it. And you need to make the bathroom, for example, accessible for them, and being able to have a bath properly on their own. I mean, they are still human, and they want to have privacy. We can't be in the bathroom with them forever, all the time. So, it's simple that they're just making the household accessible for them as well. And if we can get our government on board, at least, provide some sort of funding towards those things there, or even have certain, they have tenders for everything. So at least get a tender out there. There's a handful of people with special needs that needs assistance. At least, get their household sorted out for them and help out in that sense.
Yeah, agreed. 100% agreed. Kerry?
Yeah, I think I'm in agreement with Tasneem. I think it's keeping the hope and creating knowledge and awareness for the next generation of people that may have to suffer through this. I don't see a lot of change for a lot of us that are quite a lot older, but I think being a part of the change for them is really important.
Yeah, agreed. And lastly, Nicole?
I could talk forever. I think I've been put in a place where I'm religious, and I'm a Christian, so I believe that God's given me this journey for a reason, so I can spread hope to other people. And I've always believed that if I just touch one person's life, then I've done my job in life, and I've fulfilled my purpose. But I'm not going to stop at just that one person. So like at schools, all I did from grade 10 to matric was about SMA. I went to other schools and I spoke about SMA, and I made them aware of it. I went to neighboring schools. I was at Open Air School, which is a special needs school, and schools in the area, like schools that literally shared our fence, didn't know what Open Air was, and the fact that we have disabled students who are doing mainstream studies and stuff like that. So I would go out to those schools. I would talk to them about it. I'd let them know that this is our disability. We have treatments available, but we can't afford it. Things like that, where we're getting our generation more aware of it, was my ploy into the world of just getting just more awareness. And I'm doing that in campus now. Every year, August, I do a talk on campus about SMA because it's our month and we're here to shine. So I'm planning one again very soon when we do the candle lighting and we do small things just to get people more involved and like ask me a question. I'd rather you ask me a stupid question than assume something. So just doing small things like that, I'm never going to stop. Whether I get treatment or not, I'm never going to shut up, and you're not going to ever not hear me talk. So just my fire is just getting more fueled by everyone else's ignorance. But yeah.
Wow, that's an amazing way to end off. Wow, guys, thanks so much. It's really been such an informative journey and like such an informative discussion today. And you guys have left me feeling inspired. And you've also lit a crack up my ass in terms of, you know, going back to the powers that be and hopefully getting them to do better. I don't say that we'll win, but they can certainly do better. So we will certainly pick that fight up. In terms of SMA Awareness Month, I really hope that you guys go on to share your stories as much as possible. If there's anything that you guys are doing, planning, wanting us to share from our side, please just engage with our team so that we can do that and support you in any way that we can. Thanks so very much for participating today and for sharing all your journeys and for being so vulnerable and personal. It really, really means a lot to us. And yeah, I mean, let's touch base again. We will share the report with you with the key insights for your guys' further inputs if you have anything. But yeah, just a massive thank you. And I don't know, this wasn't something that I'd planned to do, but I thought obviously because it's SMA Awareness Month, maybe, I don't know if you guys would be comfortable with me taking a screenshot. And then I'm going to ask Miss to share it just with regards to the discussion. So we'll crop out the stuff on the chats and stuff. Is everyone comfortable with that? But then we're going to need Jess is smiling. We're going to need Andrew to smile. And then I don't know how to do it. I think it's print screen, hey? Okay, everyone, 1, 2, 3. Perfect. I think that worked. I'm going to pop it to the team. Let's see if they've got it. I see. Yeah, that's worked beautifully. Thanks so much, guys. It's honestly been great. Really look forward to chatting and obviously developing some really, really tangible action plans. And going forward, yeah, just stay in touch, keep in touch, let us know what happens, what progresses, what changes. And we'll obviously do absolutely everything we can to make sure that we make some positive changes for this community. You guys really do, you know, you mean a lot to us. All right. So with that, I'm going to say bye-bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
Kelly.
Cheers. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
You as well.